Coming up on Network Africa, South African president to announce cabinet reshuffle. Prison guards killed after 4 jihadists escaped from Mauritania's prison. Ethiopia's Tigray People's Liberation Front denies forming interim government. Hello and welcome to the program this week. I'm Anne Nwawodo. Let's begin with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Shouting through megaphones, a dozen Congolese anti-French protesters waylaid commuters on a busy road in the capital Kinshasa and passed out leaflets to boost opposition to a visit by French President Emmanuel Macron on Saturday. Their campaign was part of a smattering of protests in Democratic Republic of Congo ahead of Macron's arrival for the final leg of a Central Africa tour, during which he sought to keep the focus away from politics. Macron announced a new Africa strategy after a deepening security crisis in West Africa's Sahel region fueled anti-French protests and brought juntas to power in Burkina Faso and Mali, which have rejected long-standing military ties. The schedule of the ongoing tour, which includes stops in Gabon, Angola, and Congo Republic for the first time in his presidency, suggests a focus on soft diplomacy with events linked to the environment and culture. Still on Saturday, French President Emmanuel Macron pledged 34 million euros of aid to Congo's conflict-hit east and said any party seeking to derail peace efforts there should face sanctions.
Que la France reste fidèle.
He was speaking during an official visit to Democratic Republic of Congo. France has previously joined the United Nations, Congo, and other countries in accusing Rwanda of supporting the M23. But Macron was asked during a news conference in Kinshasa to more firmly condemn Rwanda. A peace process brokered by regional powers in Angola in November has so far failed to end the fighting, but the French president said he had confidence in the plan.
Merci beaucoup, Vos Excellences.
Hundreds of opposition supporters in Tunisia defied an official ban on their protests against the president on Sunday after some of their leaders were arrested, breaking through a police barrier in central Tunis to rally in the city's main street. Before the protesters broke through the barrier, police warned them by loudspeaker that the demonstration was illegal, but added that they would not stop them by force. Up to 1,000 protesters were heard chanting, "Shut down the coup," and "We want the release of the arrested." The National Salvation Front coalition combines Tunisia's biggest party, the Islamist Ennahda, the Stop the Coup protest movement, and some other political parties demanding that President Kais Saied step down. The protest was one of the coalition's smallest against Saied, but it still showed it could mobilize on the streets in the teeth of a crackdown on its leaders, while the police showed they were not yet willing to forcefully halt demonstrations.
To other stories now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will announce changes to his cabinet later today. According to the president's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, Mr. Ramaphosa is expected to name a new deputy president following the resignation of David Mabuza. The seat is widely expected to be taken by the new ANC deputy president, Paul Mashatile. The changes were widely expected after Mr. Ramaphosa was re-elected as leader of the ruling African National Congress Party in December. It paved the way for him to seek a second presidential term in elections scheduled for next year. Mr. Ramaphosa is also expected to fill the newly created position of electricity minister as the country battles a power crisis. Meanwhile, 5 suspects appeared at the magistrate court in Cape Town today over a disappearance of a 22-year-old German tourist last month. Nick Frischig also was allegedly robbed while hiking, and some items stolen from him were found in the possession of the suspects. Police now say that among the items found was a credit card, adding that investigators believe it was taken during the robbery. The National Prosecuting Authority in the Western Cape said the case has now been postponed until May the 4th for further investigation.
I can confirm that the 5 men which were arrested for robbery with aggravating circumstances appeared at the Wynberg Magistrates Court this morning. They were found in possession of the items belonging to the 22-year-old German national who has disappeared. The court was told that there's more investigation that still needs to be done, which include taking the witness statements, the DNA, and analyzing cell phone material.
4 jihadist prisoners escaped from a Mauritanian prison in the capital after killing prison guards. According to the Interior Ministry, the incident happened on Sunday night amid a reported fire exchange in which the 2 guards were killed and 2 others were wounded. Authorities have tightened security around the prison, and the hunt for the fugitives is already underway. The Interior Ministry has asked the public to report any information that could help apprehend the suspects. Ethiopia's Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels have denied establishing a transitional administration in the northern region in accordance with a peace agreement signed in November last year. Local media reports that the TPLF had finalized the process of forming a 28-member interim regional administration, which needed approval by the federal government. However, the TPLF spokesperson, Reda, said the Tigray interim administration will only be established after mutual consultations between both parties and the Pretoria Agreement. Major political parties in that region have been calling for an inclusive interim government to steer the region as it tries to recover from the devastating civil war. But just last month, the opposition parties in Tigray boycotted the conference on the formation of an interim government, accusing the TPLF of monopolizing the whole process. The VOA's Maya Miseher joins me now from Addis Ababa. Maya, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
All right, so what's really going on in the Tigray region as we speak?
Well, following the November peace deal, both sides have taken certain steps to follow through on the implementation of this peace deal. And part of this peace deal is the opening up of humanitarian aid to the region, restoring basic services and the likes. Part of this is the finalizing the formation of the interim regional administration. And at this moment, there is a finalized outline according to local reports. And this interim regional administration is expected to oversee matters of Tigray region until elections are held for Tigray. And this is, as you earlier mentioned, taking place despite opposition parties in the region saying that it is not inclusive. However, the TPLF spokesperson, Getachew Reda, has tweeted saying that Tigray interim administration will be established only after mutual consultations between the parties of the Pretoria Agreement, which is the TPLF and the Ethiopian federal government, and that this administration cannot be established without Addis's involvement. So currently there is a finalized outline. The discussions over what this interim government's goals would be, the power allocation, as well as representation has been done. However, it's still awaiting input from the federal government.
All right. So when both sides agreed for this peace deal, I mean, they felt it was in their own interest, given the situation of distrust. Do you think this peace deal is workable in the long run?
So according to many reports and what is happening on the ground, the peace deal is being implemented despite shortcomings. Last month, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed met with, and other senior government officials met with Tigrayan leaders for the first time after 2 years. And the discussions involved, the steps that were taken in the implementation of the peace deal, as well as what needs urgent attention and further attention, according to an interview. So this is where it's at, the process.
Now, the conflict situation seems to have broken down into, ethnic confrontations, even outside the Tigray region. But by the way of efforts what do you think will be quelling such problems and confrontations now in that region?
Ethnic confrontations have been going on in other parts of the country. One of these places is Oromia region, where there have been a lot of reports coming from the region, including by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Soldiers of the Oromo Liberation Army, which is a group designated as a terrorist group by the Ethiopian government, have attacked shelters where IDPs or internally displaced people have been living, and this have been targeting people with Amhara ethnic backgrounds as well. In terms of what's been happening to quell these, just recently there was a call for reconciliation made by the president of the Oromo region in Ethiopia, and the Oromo Liberation Army. The group has said that it is open for negotiations, that it is open to talk. However, it rejects the idea of a local mediator because it believes that it cannot be, if it is a local mediator, it will not be outside the sphere of the government influence. So this is the progress in terms of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, the shadow of Eritrea and its army participating in this conflict remains, in spite of requests and promises that they will withdraw from Ethiopia. What's the update in Ethiopia now? Have they even withdrawn?
There have been some reports coming from eyewitnesses done by VOA as well in 2 towns in Tigray, in Shire and in Aksum, that witnesses are saying that Eritrean forces are withdrawing. But this was in December. Around the end of January, a spokesperson for the TPLF, Getachew Reda, said that despite what he said is a commendable sign of withdrawal, there are thousands of Eritrean and Amhara forces in Tigray.
So as the situation is now, with everything happening, how much pressure can outside powers bring into all of this?
Just recently, the Ethiopian government is opposing or lobbying to cut the mandate of a UN-backed investigation into Ethiopia, to cut short the mandate. And this sentiment was recently reiterated by the Deputy Prime Minister, who spoke at the ministerial opening at the AU summit and said that this brings unwarranted political pressure on the country and that it could actually undermine national peace institutions. On the other hand, there is a call for African solutions to African problems, and Africans leading their endeavors to silence the guns in Africa.
All right, thank you very much. VOA's Maya Mistikiri, thank you for speaking to us from Addis Ababa. And in just a moment, when we return, Tropical Cyclone Freddy forecast to return to Mozambique. We'll bring you the details of this and more in just a moment. Stay with us. The deputy spokesperson of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Farhan Haq, says that violence in Somalia has killed at least 80 people and injured a further 451 others. These figures are according to the United Nations mission in Somalia and the UN Human Rights Office between December the 28th and February the 28th. He added that more than 185,000 people have reportedly been displaced and hospitals have been damaged as a result of insecurity.
Today, in a statement, the humanitarian coordinator for Somalia ad interim, Magata Gwise, said that he is extremely concerned about the humanitarian impact of the fighting in Las Kanud in the disputed Sul region. According to the UN mission in Somalia and the UN Human Rights Office, between the 28th of December and the 28th of February, the violence killed at least 80 people and injured a further 451 among those not fighting, including medical personnel. Mr. Guis noted that with the fighting now in its fourth week, more than 185,000 people have reportedly been displaced, and hospitals have been damaged, jeopardizing access to essential care for the wounded. He called for respect for humanitarian and medical workers, respect for medical facilities and services, and to allow the wounded and sick to receive the medical care and attention required by their condition without discrimination. Mr. Guis also called for unhindered humanitarian access to all those in need.
Burundi has deployed the first part of troops to the volatile Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The forces arrived in Goma as part of a regional force to monitor and verify the ceasefire and withdrawal by all armed groups. The seven-nation East African community began deploying troops late last year in the DRC, but it has been struggling with the rise of militias, including the rebel March 23 movement. The fighting in North Kivu province has displaced huge numbers of people and exacerbated regional tensions, with the DRC government accusing Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels, claims denied by Kigali but supported by the US and several Western nations. Meanwhile, following a deterioration of the security situation in Ituri in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the UN peacekeeping mission has conducted 2 missions there. United Nations spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric said the missions have happened in the communities of Katoto and the Solenyama to ensure peace and security in those areas. United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, from Nepal have received the UN Medal for their service in maintaining durable peace across South Sudan at a time when subnational violence and displacement is rising. Nepal's contributions to UNMISS began in April 2014, and the mission remained committed to preventing conflict, protecting civilians, and keeping up the higher standards of operational readiness.
It is a unique and special moment for every peacekeeper who stands in front of an audience waiting to be pinned with the iconic UN medal. You deployed in AMIS in April 2022, and since then have steadily demonstrated excellent performance in implementing your duties?
Actually, first of all, professionalism. We feel that we get new knowledge in our professional career, working with different person from different countries. That's why I feel I get more professionalism during this mission.
Here in UNMISS, we have the FPU contingent who is standing right in front of me, but we also have the great pleasure of having at the moment 22 individual police officers from Nepal. And it's very easy to see them around in the compounds because they have their bright blue shirts. It's very easy to see you, and I would like to also in this moment say thank you for your efforts and your contribution to UNMISS as such.
Meanwhile, South Sudan's main opposition political party, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, is demanding that President Salva Kiir reinstates Defense Minister Angelina Teny. President Kiir sacked Ms. Teny last week in a presidential decree. She was the country's first female defense minister. The president also dismissed Interior Minister Mahmoud Suleiman, and no reasons were given for that dismissal. The Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition has condemned and rejected the unilateral removal of Ms. Teny. It called it a violation of the revitalized peace agreement, which gives parties the power to remove their representatives in the Council of Ministers and nominate the replacements by notifying the president. However, analysts say the latest move seems to suggest that the relations between Mr. Kiir and Mr. Machar remain strained. Libya is questioning the will and the desire of the current political actors to hold inclusive and transparent elections in the year 2023. Well, that's according to the United Nations top official in Libya, Abdoulaye Bathily, who was speaking to the Security Council. Mr. Bathily, who is the special representative of the Secretary General for Libya and the head of the United Nations support mission in Libya, said that following consultations on ways to overcome the current political impasse, he was pleased to report that by and large, all regional and international parties agreed on this necessity to hold inclusive and transparent elections this year.
23. Libyans are impatient. They question the will and desire of the current interim political actors to hold inclusive and transparent election in 2023. I am pleased to report that by and large, all the regional and international partners agreed on the necessity to hold inclusive and transparent elections in 2023. Libya's political class is going through a major legitimacy crisis. One could say but most institutions lost their legitimacy years ago. Solving this legitimacy crisis should therefore be priority for all political actors willing to change the status quo. Regrettably, the already limited civic space in Libya continues to be further restricted, silencing the voices of civil society groups and activists. I am alarmed by a wave of arrests of women, human rights defenders accused of offending Libyan tradition, following the activation of the anti-cyber crime law on 17th of January.
The Mozambican weather authorities say Cyclone Freddy is returning to the Mozambique Channel and Zambezia and Sofala regions may be hit. According to meteorologists, the storm is moving at a speed of 13 kilometers per hour towards the southwest coast of Madagascar, and it could reach the severe tropical storm stage. Mozambique's National Institute of Meteorology has predicted continuous heavy rains over the ocean and winds of up to 110 kilometers per hour, accompanied by gusts of up to 150 kilometers per hour, which could disturb the sea, generating waves that are about 10 feet tall. The agency, however, warns people to take precautionary and safety measures. Well, in other parts, as the drought in the Horn of Africa enters a sixth failed rainy season, the UN Refugee Agency is now calling for urgent assistance to help millions of displaced people from Somalia, Ethiopia, and even in Kenya, who are struggling to survive amid scarce water resources, hunger, insecurity, and conflict. Due to a scaled-up humanitarian response, farming has so far been averted in Somalia, but people are still continuing to battle life-threatening food and water shortage, resulting from massive losses of harvest, livestock, and income. Local commodity prices have also remained at an all-time high, and they are out of reach for many people.
With no immediate end in sight to one of the longest and most severe droughts on record, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is appealing for $137 million to provide life-saving aid to 3.3 million refugees and internally displaced people who have been forced to flee their homes in search of safety and assistance, as well as affected local host communities. The dangerous confluence of conflict and climate in the region is worsening an already dire humanitarian situation. As a result, hundreds of thousands of people have been uprooted from their homes in search of safety and assistance. In Somalia alone, since the start of the year, over 287,000 people have been internally displaced due to conflict and drought. Due to space constraints, for instance, in Kenya's Dadaab camps, arriving refugees seeking relief from this climate catastrophe have been forced to reside along the outskirts of the camps, where assistance is limited. So you may have seen our statement.
That's Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu.